Hi everybody, and welcome to our very last review of the character projects. So today we're just going to talk a little bit about everyone's character project, see if there's anything else that we can possibly, in the time we have left, small changes that we might be able to do to enhance the design. Um, yeah, and I have two things to say, I guess. I could always say a lot more, but just two things to say. One is that this revision process, this particular class, and I know we've got other classes that do this, where you have one project that you're working on for a while, and especially when you get into this fine-tuning process. So like what we've been doing for the last few versions of the character, where we're not necessarily, like, after we added the background and the text, we're really just kind of experimenting, seeing where we can take it. And one of the things that I think is always interesting is how um, sometimes you can take a design that you really feel is like just great the way it is, and then you do a little more work on it, and suddenly you realize, oh, I've taken it to a new level. Like, I've really, like, you can go from that version that you thought, "Hey, that's finished, it looks really good," and then you can actually do, like, maybe even very small things or maybe big things, but even small things, and you'll notice, wow, that really makes a big impact. Just by which to say that, in design, a lot of times we just never do feel like we've completely finished a project. I think a lot of people in the visual arts feel that way. You can always keep working on something. And sometimes you really can go a lot further. You can kind of, in a way, push your own design skills a little further. That's, I think, what you're really doing. Uh, and then sometimes you just know it's done, and that you don't, if you work on it anymore, you have, you could potentially um, take some life and freshness out of it. So it's always like a balancing act. Sometimes it's hard to know, but in any case, this process of revising and revising can be really valuable to see how far you can work your assignments and, develop your skills, and also change your eye as well, like your visual acuity of what makes a good design. So I think that's really um, a really good process. So the other thing I want to just mention too is that, look back, if you have a chance, look back at your sketch and see where you've come all the way from your sketch to the final assignment. I think you'll be very surprised, pleasantly surprised. And just in terms of Photoshop as well, the skills you've learned in this class, I also want to emphasize that the skills you've learned in this class are very, I would say, they're pretty advanced. Like, of course, Photoshop is a pretty big program. There's so many things you can keep learning and doing in Photoshop. But what you've learned in this class is really, I think, will make you look like you do know Photoshop, even if you're still, still kind of fine-tuning the skills you've learned. Like, you have to refresh what a layer mask is later. That's perfectly fine. But the idea, a lot of the ideas now of adjustment layers and working with color and layer masks, puppet warp. These are all really pretty amazing skills. And also just this idea of non-destructive editing, which we've learned, which I guarantee you a lot of people working in Photoshop who even make their living on Photoshop don't know how to non-destructively edit an image the way you guys now know how to do that. And it's just because we've been learning from, I think, a really good textbook and really good assignments to be able to do that. So keep practicing these skills if you can. Every once in a while, if you find an image that you find inspiring, and you want to do a layer mask with it or put it on a new background just for fun, even in your own, if you take your own pictures, experiment, maybe doing some of the corrections that we did, right? Like taking things out or adjusting the color. Just keep experimenting, because that keeps your skills fresh, and that's also really valuable. You'll never forget the skills, but sometimes it's like you have to keep reminding yourself to in order to do it. Okay, I think that's all I wanted to say. Okay, so I'm going to switch over into Photoshop now. Okay, Susan, yeah, I really like the changes you've made. It's so interesting how the arms, which were the red Twizzlers before, how when you change them to green, they still look like Twizzlers, but they're now green. It's so interesting. Sometimes we think that things have to be the color that is the same color as in real life, but as designers, we can really totally be creative about that, and it can often be make a design more interesting. Yeah, I love the movement. it's really nice, sort of the sense that you have like her lifting her feet and how you've placed the shadow underneath. So it's like she's now not kind of on the ground. She's sort of lifted up off the ground, which is great. And also just all of the other movement, and the color here too, where you've adjusted, it looks like you've adjusted the blueberry color just a little bit. And it's interesting how that little bit of change, it still has the sense of having a bluish color, but it picks up a little bit of the green color. So it starts really working together. So yeah, I don't see any changes you need to make. This looks really good. It feels like, done. If there's, one very small change, what I might suggest is for your name here, sometimes in design, we default to black for type sometimes. And what you can actually do to bring that color a little bit more, like a dark color, more into the design is instead of using black, and sometimes black for text is really, it's what you want to use, like for certain types of more functional documents, like a newspaper. But in this case, what I would do is I would take this black and I would turn it the color of in this case, anywhere you have a darker color, could be from here or in here, so that it has a hint of the underlying color. Like, for example, if you used green, so it would have a hint of the underlying green underneath, let's see here. Can my trick, which I think I've shown before, let's see if I can do it here. Yeah, I don't think I have the font. I think this is, I installed the font you gave me. Thank you so much. But I think this might be a different font. But in any case, when you have the font, what you can do is you can actually use the character palette here, which is what I like to do. And after you have selected the text, just like this, you can go in here with the color, and I'll just click OK. And then you can actually just sample any color in your design, and it'll turn the color to whatever it is. And I don't think, again, I don't know if I'll be able to do that because I don't have the text. But anyhow, that's it. Everything else looks really good, and yeah, nice job with your design overall. Yeah, so it looks like you have been working on adding different adjustment layers, which is, oh yeah, look at that. That's great. That's exactly what you did a much better job than I was doing with that. Just kind of creating a little bit more of that contrast, which is really great. And it's always, really in a lot of designs, adding a little more contrast can really amp up the drama and the energy of a design. So I think that all looks really good. And yeah, so you got, your character. I'd like the background looks really good. And yeah, it feels really complete to me. If there was maybe only just one thing I might do is maybe, do you see that line back there? I didn't notice this before, otherwise I would have mentioned it. Sometimes I'm so busy looking at, different parts that I miss things. But you may want to just go through here and just, you could use the spot healing tool here on the smart. You have to go to the smart object and just kind of just go through here and just maybe just, let's see, let's do that here if we can do that. Yeah, so you could just do that right here. You could just like get rid of that line with your spot healing brush. Just go down this line real quick. And of course, doing it, well, oh wait, you have it on a smart object layer, so yeah. Anyhow, okay. Nice job and good work overall. And yeah, congratulations on completing the class. Randy, well, I'm glad that we are able to see your design. It's been a while, I think, since it's been in the group critique. So yeah, I think so. Talking about your background here, I think you have a new background, which is great. I think that it's definitely better. I would say that maybe even just using this little piece back here of your background would be the way to go. So, just taking and maybe just moving it over here behind your character. I don't even think you really need anything else with it. just make it a bit bigger because that little pattern is really pretty cute. So I'm kind of getting rid of everything else. So that would be the first start. The second part is I would, you want to really focus on the character in your design. So what I would say is, let's move that down here, is to crop the entire thing around your, just, so that we really just see the character itself. I'm not really centering. I'm doing so quickly. I'm not really centering it. So now already we're starting to really like zoom in on the character. So the next thing I'd like you to do is, it's really important that you actually build the character itself from the different objects. This is something that we did back in milestone 3, where we took the object. So rather than having, so right now this looks to be like your character, and it really is, it's cute, but it's really a character that somebody else created, the toy maker, and we want to build our own character. So you want to take different objects and you want to build a character from 5 different objects. And so rather than having like a lot of objects that are scattered around as kind of background, or context, you want those objects to be a part of your character in some way. Like maybe this would be the arms, and maybe, this would be, the head of your character, So like maybe, you might want to take a look at the group critique back in milestone 3 to, just review, how we were doing that. Because it looks like maybe you kind of skipped a few, critiques and steps in here. But that's the main thing. And I think, you've got, I can see you've been making layer masks here. So it really wouldn't be that hard for you to just build your character. Go back to some of your sketches and take a look at them, but you want to have 5 different objects building it. So like a torso, a head, arms, legs, and then put them all together. And I think you'd have a really cute character. You've got your text here. It's a little bit hard to read. I might take out the drop shadow for the moment. And I don't have this font style to be able to experiment with it, but I would try something that's a little heavier. Like this is quite light font. It's kind of very sort of thin. Try something that's maybe like that handwriting font, but a little heavier, and then it'll stand out more. And I like the color. I think that's a nice choice for your character. Okay, so that's what I'd work on right now, is working on building the character, doing it, some of those bigger moves we have of simpler background, and just, taking out all of the areas around the background. I mean, you put a lot of work into them, but it's a little bit not quite what we're doing for this particular project. So I'd like you to focus again a little bit more on the character. Okay, you have like the next couple days. Our class is closing tomorrow, so just keep working on it, and I think you'll be able to pull something together pretty quickly. Yeah, analogous is a great choice for your character as well, because working with these warm colors is really very appropriate for your character design. That kind of intensity of the kind of terribleness. We tend to associate warm, especially red, with anger or rage, that kind of thing. So I think that was a great choice. Yeah, and so I like what you've done here. Looks like you've taken you've cleaned up the torso, which is awesome. It makes it a lot stronger. And yeah, so I would say that this is really, pretty close to feeling done. I think that you had a shadow here. I don't know if you want to like keep that, or kind of feels like because of the lighting, that the lighting that you have, that it would be good to have a shadow. So maybe turn that back on again. So so something you can do here with the shadow, because right now the shadow, this is maybe why you're not using it, is it doesn't seem to really make sense, because it's like flowing off into the distance, and it looks like what would happen here is that the shadow would be coming in this direction, and then it would go, you see, when it hits the wall, then it goes up the wall. It becomes vertical. But, we have the tools now to be able to fix that. So what I might do is, first of all, just maybe duplicate this layer in case you want to just save it. But we can actually use Puppet Warp. Remember when we did Puppet Warp back in I'm going to use just select Puppet Warp. Back in, we didn't use a lot of Puppet Warp, but the exercise where we tilted the model's head back. So we can use the same idea here, where we can put in just some points. This is where maybe I'll want to drag it from, and then maybe I'll put in a few points in here right along the wall. Sometimes you just have to experiment back and forth with how many pins you might need. Let's just zoom in a little bit here. Maybe we might need one up here, be down here too. Let's see. So we're just going to kind of drag it, you know, kind of like upwards. So, and maybe move this a little bit around over. Something like that. You can kind of move things around a little bit if you need to add another pin. Like maybe you want this, you know, whole shadow to, well, let's just see what it looks like. You know, you may want to like add a few more pins just to maybe move it off to the left a little bit, or you know, change the angle of the whole shadow so like when it starts, like if, let's go back here for a minute here, let's just cover history. You know, maybe take that shadow and angle it a little before you start the puppet warp so that it's a little bit more angled, because then it won't be so, you know, close to the body. It would be nice. It's nice when you have a little bit of space for the shadow, so it's not right on your body or behind your body. Anyhow, so that's what I'd work on, just kind of playing with that. I'm still, you know, I love the head. I'm still a little distracted by the words on here, so this is the same feedback that I had before. And also, I'd still love to see the text just a little lighter, but I think it is legible, so, you know, I think that it's okay the way it is. So that's, I mean, that's the thing I guess I'd work on the most, is just maybe considering a shadow. A shadow would be normal. I have to say that it would be good to add a shadow for this character because the lighting is so strong, and there would naturally be a shadow. So it seems like a wonderful opportunity to get that more realistic three-dimensional effect to your character. All right, well, nice job. All right, so here is your task 2, and here is task 3. Yeah, so that's already just spatially a lot better. And oh yeah, you did some nice color work here, adding some pink. I like the pink and the red. I think it just kind of gives your character a little bit more life. So, you know, yes, so patching, sometimes patching or like removing things from photographs can be a little bit challenging, in the sense that in your case, there's so much going on in the background, it's hard to find, like Photoshop kind of needs clean spaces to be able to do that effectively. So, something I might even consider, let me just look at this a little bit more. So I would be inclined to see if there's a way to just remove like all of this, you know, all of this you know, technical stuff, you know, just to simplify it. And so, you know, I would just kind of create, make this a smart object or duplicate this layer, you know, to save it. And then just, you know, maybe, I mean, we could try just taking maybe the, yeah, sometimes these tools rely on a lot of, maybe the patch tool. You can also try just using the rectangular marquee. So you want kind of like an area here that's sort of, and then maybe you could try using the content aware move tool here, and then just maybe move it down. It'll kind of just sort of, the content aware move tool is sort of like kind of fudge it a little bit, kind of blend it together a little bit. So you could just literally just take this tool and continue to, do this technique of like taking a little bit of a piece here, I missed a little bit there, taking a little bit of a piece and just transferring it down, keep moving it down until you erase that. I think that because it's so far away once you do this, it'll be fine, but you can already see that just if you continue doing that, that'll really help simplify it. I think it'll make it look a lot better because I think you are still suffering from a lot of busyness in your design, and so anything you can do to remove detail would be really like a really beneficial thing. I was even thinking like maybe you should remove the eyes and because you have so much going on here. I don't know about that. I think they do. Let's just take one off here and see. Because you have this such a lovely element behind, like these beautiful curves, that it just seems like a shame to sort of cover all of that up with more, detail that can make it harder to see. Like, would that then operate as a head? I don't know. I kind of like the triangles in the records because it does definitely make it an eye. But, so experiment. So that's what I would keep doing is patching that, just using that technique. Um, I think that's the main thing at this point. Anything you can sort of see that could reduce detail, would be really great, or add more movement to your character. It has a little movement. It's still, yeah. Um, okay, well, I think that's the main thing. Um, just keep experimenting and yeah, good job. Cal, okay, yeah, you did some changes. You removed the biker edition. Uh, and I liked the biker edition before, but I think it's fine that you removed it as well, just because, you know, if you don't need it, then that's a good choice. So you went from kind of the grays to a much more sort of brightly colored image, experimenting with adjustment layers, which, yeah, why not? Um, so I would say that the main thing I would work on a little bit more is just making sure, first of all, that that your background doesn't advance too much in the design, like because the saturated green really does, bring it forward, like saturated colors come forward. So maybe what you could consider doing here in your adjustment layer is, desaturating the color a little bit more to kind of make sure that, in a design in general. So some of the rules of color is that use bright color in small amounts. Now, of course, the rules can be broken, just to kind of like, so that you don't, otherwise you can sort of get like fatigue with the viewer, and you want to just sort of see how you can sort of subtly enhance a design, maybe with some pops of color. So I think that already looks a little bit better. Something to keep in mind too, though, is like, to unify a design, one of the things we think about is how we can repeat colors so that, like, for example, you have green in the background. Where else do you have green in the design so that it links? So, for example, what I would do here, if you want to make green happen in the design, then maybe these arms should be green. If you want blue in the design, where else in the blue, in the design? Oh, I see you've got sort of, maybe the glasses would sort of match, but maybe blue here, maybe the background should be blue. Do you know what I mean? Like now this color here doesn't feel like it quite belongs anymore, because it's sort of like a rust color, like kind of an earthy color, and there isn't a repetitive part of the design. I mean, you could say that both legs are the same color, but you do kind of want to, it's like you want to kind of spatially unite things. So I would say keep working on that color and see if you can, kind of like this orange tone here, where else could it be repeated in the design? You really need to kind of think about that. Whereas like your previous design, I actually thought that you had solved the color quite nicely. So if you're sort of thinking about, maybe you could hold on to the colorized version for, keeping experimenting on. But maybe now what you could do is maybe just kind of keep experimenting with this guy a little bit more, but, keeping this kind of color harmony, which I think, again, I do think is working quite well. Um, okay, when you add color, like a lot of color into design, it's just naturally going to take some time to balance and kind of play with it. So, you know, so if you want, okay, one of the suggestions I would have, if you want to go with more intense color, what I would say then is to pick one single color, we'll call it a monochrome, and make everything colorized, but with that single color. Like, so, maybe you would just work with red, or you would just work with blue, and everything, or green, and everything else in the design would be that color. That's another way that you can go from like what you basically had here was, you basically had sort of like a very neutral, you could almost say monochrome, um, with just hints of, accent colors. And so you could move to something more colorized, but um, here, but not with so many different types of hues, if that makes sense. All right, so that's what I keep experimenting with. You might want to kind of also experiment with just a little more movement if you like, maybe moving the arms in different directions or the head, or just kind of experimenting with that a little more. Hey, Joshua, so this was task 2, and here is task 3. And so I think to me it looks like, so I would go back, so in the previous, I would check the previous class critique, um, and just make sure that I have some suggestions in there, and I don't have anything really new to add, other than it looks like you lost maybe a little bit of the ear here, which, that can happen. Let's see. Oh, I see. So, oh, I know why. It's just because there's a little banana covering over it. I see. You just move the layer around a little bit. Okay, great. Um, yeah, that makes sense now. For some reason, I was just looking at the ear, but that's fine. So yeah, just check out my suggestions from the previous group critique if you haven't yet. And then just also, the only thing new I have to add is just make sure that you're using this name. This is the correct name, Flippin' Food Fred. So you just want to make sure to keep that. Okay, let me know if you have any questions. Hey, Jessica. Yeah, I love your um, movement you've added here. It's so cute the way it's kind of just perched on one leg and kind of waving, or, you know, it's really nice. I think that's just really brought it to life. I think your text looks really good. Very nice job with your text. And yeah, overall, I think it's good. I think the shadow looks very nice. The only thing I might suggest, so it looks like you've moved your background. I always have different, when you see it again, now that you've made so many good changes, now we can sort of see, okay, what's the next thing? I would say that I might just get rid of this little bit back here, you know, sometimes just, let's see, let's zoom out a little bit. Yeah, I would, go to this layer. Let's just duplicate it just so that we have it. And, you can just literally like grab, this is a real sort of quick and dirty way of doing it, but just grab the rectangle tool and then just literally mask that out, so that you get a, just a simple background. You can actually sort of maybe change, that's a little bit of, fairly, uh, abrupt white. Maybe there's like some kind of more gentle white that you could use, something like to play around with that. Oh, so I always think that this is Illustrator. I have a problem with, let's see, I think you need to use, what do you need to use in this? I'm used to using Illustrator where you just can change a color by using that method, but I think it's different in Photoshop. I don't use this technique very often. Hold on. Okay, you can just click on it and click to double click it, and then again you can sort of maybe play around with the color. maybe. I don't know. Maybe that's a little too stark, you know, it's too obvious. It's kind of like because then it's such a flat color. But maybe you could you know what you could do? You could just take like a picture of a wall, like a simple wall. So you get a little bit of that texture and you could just pop that back there. Do you know? Like just to kind of put that in there to make it look a little more part of the photograph. Um, so let's take that off here. Because again, I think that this, yeah, I think this would be too much to mask. So probably, let's actually just grab a wall to do that. I just found I just Googled blank wall and just found this blank wall. It had kind of like this nice sort of gradient on it, so it looked quite natural, like the lighting was changed. And I just popped it in there, and you can see you can put it then anywhere you know you want it to go in terms of your background. I just sort of arbitrarily picked a spot. I deleted a little bit of it out of, but you know, and then you could grab an adjustment layer for this if you want to kind of make the color a little bit more greenish or yellow or more beigey, you know, to kind of blend in. Um, you know, I like the bluish color. I wonder too if you might even want to like maybe adjust this color a little bit for your background maybe to kind of, it's like beige right now, maybe it could go a little more yellow or green to sort of fit into it. But you know, anyhow, that's a easy fix, and it really again makes your character just again puts more emphasis on it by removing that background. And again, you know, you can always like just like we've been montaging different photographs together, you can do the same thing here with your background. Okay, nice job with all of the changes you've made. Sarah, well, I'm really glad you were able to get your work in for this critique so we can talk a little bit about your design. Okay, so you have Terrible Toys Todd. I like this text. I think that's really nice, really suits your character. So I would say, so just, you know, to reiterate a few of the things that I've mentioned before, with your design, you do want to make sure that when you add your layer mask, that you haven't deleted the background first, which is really easy to have happen. And so how you prevent that from happening is you follow the Milestone 3 Task 2 video tutorial. It's really awesome for how to bring in a photograph and then how to apply the layer mask so that you don't have that happening. Okay, so that's, you know, that is one of the important technical things we are learning in this class. So, you know, if you can go back and rebuild your character, that would be awesome. That would be a great thing to do. The other thing you want to make sure is that you're using photographs, because in this class we are only just using photographs. It's one of the things we're learning about. And it looks like, I think your shoes are a drawing. And I'm not 100% sure about this element. This also looks like a drawing here, which you have in here. So you want to take those out and just use photographs for this class to build your character. Just like this is a photograph, so this is perfect. And I think the clock to me looks like a photograph as well. So those two are awesome. Okay, so those are, I think those to me are the main things here in terms of like really getting, you know, what you came for in this class is to be able to know what a photograph is, to be able to add a layer mask. So I would focus on those two things. If you want to go further after you have done that, like, and again, you know, for these shoes, it should be really easy to find some shoes on Google Images you can use a photograph. If you want to go a little further, then I would say, you know, make sure that you add some adjustment layers in. That's what we did for this milestone for task 2. You know, you were adding some adjustment layers in. I like the background in terms of how cute it is with all the toys, but I think maybe it is a little busy for your character. So maybe if you just found a room with a blank wall and a floor and just let your character be the fun toys like element. You know, I don't think you need to have additional things around the character because your character is built out of toys, and so it should be the focal point. Okay, so I think those are some of the, you know, the main things. I'd start from the top with building the character again with the layer mask using photographs, and then if you have time, I'd work on experimenting with the background. Okay, let me know if you have any questions.